What's up guys, my name is Ace, and today I'm finally going to shed some light on exactly how bullet velocity works in modern Call of Duty, because there's actually a lot of misconceptions surrounding this, and I finally got some clarification on this, and I wanted to make sure I was passing that along to you guys today, since for many, this is actually going to have a big impact on how you create your setups. Now, before we get into that, let's have a quick look at the history of hitscan versus bullet velocity in Call of Duty. Essentially, for the entire franchise up until Black Ops 4, all regular guns used a hitscan system. And by regular guns, I'm just excluding things like launchers or crossbows or things like that that obviously fire a projectile that moves quite slowly. But with this old hitscan system, what happens here is when the gun goes off, a line trace is drawn from your point of aim toward the target. And the easiest way to think of this is like a laser shooting out of your gun, where there's zero travel time. It's just an invisible laser that's shot out, and if that invisible laser intersects with a target, then you will get a hit on that target. And with a hitscan system like this, range is irrelevant. Your target could be at a couple hundred meters, and it wouldn't matter. That shot would register just as fast as if you were point blank. And another thing to consider with the hitscan system is there was never any bullet drop, so you didn't have to aim a little bit high if your target was at an extremely long range. You just put your sight on target, pull the trigger, and you'll get a hit. And with regular Call of Duty multiplayer, that system was great because it was all about consistency. There was no leading your target, there was no bullet drop, there was no questioning whether or not you missed that shot due to the bullet velocity of your gun. You're either on target or off target, and that's all you had to worry about. And that system worked really well for older Call of Duty games because we didn't have Warzone, we didn't have Blackout, we didn't have giant ground war maps where you're getting into 100+ meter engagements on a regular basis. So consistency was much more important than accurate ballistics at the time. Now, with the introduction of Call of Duty's first Battle Royale in Black Ops 4 with Blackout, now it suddenly made a whole lot more sense to bring ballistics into the equation, because it would be kind of odd to be sniping people at hundreds of meters without ever having to account for bullet drop, or for leading a moving target, for instance. And so this is when they first introduced bullet velocity into the equation, again, for the regular guns in the game. However, it's not quite as simple as the bullet leaves the end of your gun, and immediately there is a bullet travel time to consider, and bullet drop is now taking place from the moment it leaves the muzzle. Instead, they're actually using a hybrid system, and this is supported by many years of testing with bullet velocity that I've done. You guys may have seen some of the videos I've made over the years where I found some very confusing results with bullet velocity that didn't align with this expected model of real-life ballistics. And I have now been able to confirm how this hybrid system works, so let's get into that. Now, of course, we all know that there are bullet velocity values attached to guns, and that can be changed with various attachments as well. But what you don't get to see is the fact that there's a hit scan range that's tied directly to your bullet velocity. And this hit scan range is how far your bullet would be able to travel given that bullet velocity within 50 milliseconds. Anything from 0 to 50 milliseconds is actually hit scan, and then anything beyond that, that's when you start to get bullet travel time. So just as an example, let's take the Ram 9, since it has a nice even bullet velocity at 500 meters per second. With that value, it will travel 25 meters within 50 milliseconds. And therefore, 25 meters is the hit scan range of the Ram 9, assuming you're not using any attachments to adjust that bullet velocity. And what that means is your hit detection will be exactly the same on a point-blank gunfight as a gunfight 24.9 meters away. Since in both of these cases, it's hit scan, zero travel time, zero bullet drop. However, at 26 meters, this is where bullet travel time starts to take place because you're no longer within the hit scan range. Although in that case, right at 26 meters, it's not like you're going to notice much of a difference there. We're talking a 1 meter difference. However, if we say 35 meters, this is where a really keen eye, or if you record it and put it in video editing software and slow it down frame by frame, you'll be able to detect a very slight delay now. And obviously this delay just gets bigger and bigger as you stretch the ranges out. Now that's just one example with a fairly low bullet velocity. What about a gun with a much higher bullet velocity? Let's go with the MCW 6.8, since this has a really good base bullet velocity at 930 meters per second. With this one, if we do the calculation on this, our hit scan range is 46.5 meters. And therefore, just like I said with the previous example, shooting a target at 46 meters will be exactly the same as shooting that target at point blank range because there is literally zero travel time at that point. Now, I should mention, just for clarity here, with my results, sometimes it'll be plus or minus a frame at 120 FPS. This is just due to slight latency variations within the game as well as the network. Like in this case, for instance, I would fully expect in some of my tests at 46 meters, instead of hitting at 50 milliseconds, it might hit at 42 milliseconds or 58 milliseconds, because that's a 1 frame difference. But that's just due to inherent latency in the system. It is still hit scan at that point, and you'll find that exact same variation at point blank range. The only time you start to see real deviation from this is beyond that hit scan range, And so now, to make this a lot easier for you guys, so you don't have to do this calculation every single time for every gun, I just wanted to share a chart with you guys to reference so you can quickly determine at least roughly what your hit scan range is depending on your current bullet velocity for your weapon. So the top value in orange is our bullet velocity, and then the bottom value is our hit scan range given that bullet velocity. So you can see on the super slow bullet velocity end of that, at 200 meters per second, our hit scan range is only 10 meters. Anything beyond that, now you have to start worrying about bullet drop and bullet velocity. Whereas on the much more extreme example on the other end, if we go all the way up to 1300 meters per second, now our hit scan range is 65 meters, which is a pretty crazy range. And then obviously we have everything in between those values. And you might be wondering, why is this so significant? Why does this matter so much when it comes to building my loadouts? Well, the biggest thing is just focusing on the intended engagement ranges that you want to be using for your gun. I know for a lot of people, they will always put high velocity rounds or they'll put the high grain ammunition on everything they can whenever possible. Because in theory, if we weren't using this hybrid system, technically speaking, in every gunfight, your bullet would be hitting at least slightly faster the more you increase your bullet velocity. And therefore, it's assumed that your hit detection will feel better even in more close quarters situations where in reality, you're still within the hit scan range, so there's actually no difference there. So let's illustrate this with an example. Let's say I'm using the MTZ-556, since this one is quite a solid gun and many people really like using it, especially for like close to medium ranges for an assault rifle. It's typically not the assault rifle you'd be pulling out for really long range engagements. But with this one, after the recent buff, it's got a bullet velocity of 690 meters per second. This means our hit scan range is 34.5 meters. And when you plot that out, that's pretty close to our 5-shot kill potential with the MTZ-556. And that's typically where you want the vast majority of your gunfights to fall. You don't want to be challenging gunfights in that 6-shot kill range with the MTZ-556 on a regular basis, at least. I'm not saying that you should never take that gunfight. It's just not what you should be aiming for. And especially with how the 6v6 maps are designed, the vast majority of gunfights, I'd say 9 times out of 10, my gunfights with the MTZ-556 are going to fall within this 34.5 meter range. And therefore, in every single one of those gunfights, if I were using the high velocity or high grain ammunition, I'm actually just wasting that attachment. It's not doing anything for me when it comes to bullet velocity, at least. And as a result, it's probably in my best interest to be using that attachment slot elsewhere with something that's actually going to be helping me in the majority of gunfights that I'm getting into. And just to round this out a little bit, let's also have a quick look at the Ram 9. This one, again, like I said earlier, has a bullet velocity of 500 meters per second by default, and this means our hit scan range is exactly 25 meters. And when we look at our damage profile with this, our 5-shot kill potential is just a little over 20 meters, so it's actually not even quite as good as our hit scan range, and therefore, again, this is generally where you want to keep your gunfights. I'm not saying that you should never challenge gunfights beyond that range, but how often are you going to be doing that in the grand scheme of things? For me, in my playstyle while using the Ram 9, I typically try to avoid that. Now, that's not to say that I'll never take gunfights beyond that range, because I absolutely will when I feel like I really have the advantage in that gunfight going in. But again, the vast majority of my gunfights will fall within that hit scan range, and therefore, for me at least, it just makes sense to save that attachment slot and not bother using it on something like high velocity. Now, at the end of the day, everybody's going to have to judge this for themselves. Everybody has a different playstyle. A lot of people feel much more comfortable stretching beyond the effective ranges of their gun. And in that case, sure, maybe it is in your best interest to go with something that increases your bullet velocity. Also, with this video, I'm primarily just referring to 6v6 and the engagement distances you'll tend to find in 6v6. If you're somebody that plays Warzone or Ground War or something like that, where you're going to have significantly longer ranges, that's where that bullet travel time is really going to start to come into play, and therefore, increasing your bullet velocity is often in your best interest. So I don't want you to think that with this video I'm saying never use high velocity ammo. I'm just trying to show you that at least for 6v6, it's often not going to be the best use of an attachment slot. And with that, this is where I'm curious to hear from you guys in those comments down below. First off, how do you guys feel about the fact that they are using a hybrid system here, so there's quite a bit of consistency when you're within those hit scan ranges, and then beyond that, you have to start compensating for that bullet travel time and bullet drop. And also, now that you have this information, is this going to cause you to change any of your loadouts? If you're a compulsive high velocity user in 6v6, do you think you'll save that attachment slot from now on and maybe spend it elsewhere where it's going to be helping you more often, or not? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.